Hi, everyone. Welcome to this next session in our series of webinars now. We're very excited to address the subject today of consumer perception into proteins, especially given the exploding number of alternatives for proteins that are now available for product design. Um, just so I am Dave Lundahl. Here on the left, this picture, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Insights Now. I've been spearheading a lot of our work on clean label, and I'm here today with Julie Quanti. And Julie, do you want to say a few words?
Hi, I'm a research director here at Insights Now, and I've been working very closely with the clean label community, and we've been doing research all year, and I'm really excited to share with you the results of our alternative protein study that we did last month. Thanks, Dave.
Yep. Now, from a perspective, if you do not know a lot about Insights Now, we believe that by changing the way you look at people leads to uncovering new insights into why products succeed. And that will help your speed to market and success in market. And we apply this sort of perspective here to look at as a behavioral market research, bring these behavioral sort of approaches to research for product innovation, product development, but also connecting the dots to marketing, messaging, and ensuring that your brands are positioned and developed correctly. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the content for today. And that is, if you have any questions during the course of this webinar presentation, please enter them in the side tab and either direct the question to us confidentially or to the entire audience for discussion, which we'll have at the very end of the webinar. All right, so let's get into the content for today. What we're doing, I'm going to be talking about some sort of initial discussions to talk about the subject. And that's in the section here I call What's the Beef About Going Meatless? And then I'll also show some research that we have done over the last couple of years into alternative proteins from our community of clean label enthusiasts. And then Julie is going to present a really interesting study that we have completed on alternative proteins. And then we'll do some wrap-ups. All right, so let's get into the content here. So alternative proteins, as I'm sure many of you that are attending today are well aware, are rapidly growing. In fact, the number of types of proteins available for product design is just increasing every day. The U.S. retail sales for plant-based proteins grew 24% in 2018. And while animal proteins just grew by about 12%, and that's according to some Nielsen data. Now, the market for meat substitutes is estimated at $4.6 billion last year and expected to grow to $6.4 billion here in the next 5 years. So it is an area that is rapidly growing. And most interesting and most in the press recently, it's this area about the Impossible Burger and the Beyond Meat Burger and some of the other sort of products that these companies have put out. And I thought as a starting point, we would talk a little bit about these. As you know, the Impossible Foods Burger is currently in Burger King and White Castle nationwide. It's also in restaurants like Red Robin and Qdoba. Beyond Meats just this last week issued an IPO resulting in, as of Tuesday, a market cap of $4.6 billion, which is incredible. And so if you actually look at Google Trends, this is the trends in people searching for various different words on the internet. If you look at Bean Burger, Impossible Burger, and Beyond Meat Burger here, you see some really interesting trends. And that Impossible Burger had has taken the lead, and you can see some of the fluctuations in chatter on the internet or search patterns on the internet uh, have related to various things that go on the news for either Beyond Meat or the Impossible Burger launching various products, going into Burger King or White Castle or whatever. Um, or in the case of here more recently, these IPOs, and you see some huge spikes in people searching and interested in these sort of products in the marketplace. And this is all leading to an understanding that this idea of alternative proteins is growing in the psyche of consumers, is very interesting. And so further, some work we did is to try to think about where are people, who are these people that are showing interest, and you can actually get into Google uh, trends and look at their search activities, and they actually can give you information of where people are located that are searching, and you find that the concentrations are on the West Coast, especially California. Down in Florida, it's a fairly high concentration in Colorado, a lot of concentration in the Northeast and in some major metropolitan areas. So, and what is most interesting on this, if you look at that's the on the chart on the left is Beyond Meat search activity. Now, if you look at clean label enthusiasts, which have nationally about 27%, but you see the concentrations are almost identical to the search patterns of Beyond Meat. So clean label enthusiasts are definitely, concentrated on the West Coast, the Northeast, and a lot of the same areas where Beyond Meat search activity is. So in fact, if you do a correlation, you find the correlation state by state is very high for that. So you see in some states, the percentage of the population of clean label enthusiasts, which I'm going to talk here a little bit more about, is up to over 30% in some areas, and down as low as almost 10%, some places like in the Midwest. Now, if you compare these two product lines, you see that the Impossible Burger, the types of claims used, it's simply meat from plants. Whereas Beyond Meat, which just recently had the IPO, also say they're non-GMO, they're soy-free, they're gluten-free. So this kind of brings some questions as an introduction to this subject. One of the questions we have is, why is there growing interest in alternatives? Or how do alternative protein sources compare to animal proteins as compared in terms of consumer perception? And what alternative sources of protein are most acceptable today? And what will these be more, what will be the trends? What alternative sources are going to be changing to be more acceptable in the future? And last, what are some of the trade-offs that consumers will make today for various alternative sources? So we want to address these questions today in our webinar. So let's look at some background data. The last couple of years, Insights Now, we've been involved in development of a community. And this community is based on people that we have identified in the marketplace that are clean label enthusiasts. And these individuals, what they do is they read ingredients. They are concerned about companies adding too many chemicals, and they avoid buying brands with quote unquote bad or unhealthy ingredients in them. And you can see this chart here showing there's dramatic differences between clean label enthusiasts and non-clean label enthusiasts as primary shoppers in the US in terms of the percentages. These individuals are about 27% of US shoppers, as I said earlier today, and they have high concentrations in areas such as, the West Coast and the Northeast, and down in Florida and in metropolitan areas. Now, these are forward-thinking consumers. They're lead indicators of mainstream clean label behaviors into the future because they're a group that's growing in terms of larger numbers. And so for this reason, we developed a community. This community is we're near about 1,000 people in this community that we can and so can you through a subscription service access. So some of the research I'm going to show you is based on these clean label enthusiasts. And what we did is we did something called an implicit explicit test. It's a behavioral metric comparing alternative protein ingredients, and it's an indication of purchase behavior amongst clean label enthusiasts. And so what we did is we gave them context. We said proteins for lunch, dinner when you're seeking, say a healthy meal, and we had different sort of contexts for different sort of moments. And then we presided the protein and asked people to say okay or avoid. And what we did is not only captured okay or avoid through this is through an internet survey, but we also timed how fast they made this response. Now, the timing of how fast is really interesting because what we are interested in determining was the okay avoid response fast or implicit reaction, or was it a slow or explicit reaction? Because we know that fast thinking signals greater behavioral tendency than slow thinking. So to determine what is fast or slow, we actually gave every one of the participants a warm-up sample, actually where we actually gave them numbers or we gave them color names such as this and asked them using short-term recall to select one of these 10 that were in their numbers. And from that, we're able to determine what is a cutoff time for a typical fast versus a slow response. And from this, we're able to bucket responses as fast avoid, fast okay, slow avoid, or slow okay. And then we weight the fast avoid or the fast okay responses differently into a formula and generate a 100-point scale response that we call a clean label ingredient score. Okay, so a score of 50 means half the people said it's okay. A score of 100 means everybody thought it was okay. A score of 0, everybody's going to avoid it. And they weight higher to higher percentage of fast okays gives you a higher score, and a greater percentage of fast avoids gives you a lower score. And then we put that into a database through a dashboard, and I'm going to show you some of the results that you can access through this dashboard. So looking at alternative proteins, this is a number of them that we have collected information on, and we actually have information on these for various different food products in various different moments, but I'm just showing you the aggregated information right now. So we could bucket them into 3 areas. So generally, a score that is over 60 tends to be pretty good, and that's the stuff that's shown in the green. Stuff that's between 40 and 60 as an ingredient score tends to be sort of in the middle of the road, kind of a yellow area, and the stuff that's less than 40 are things that are low. That means that consumers tend to would avoid these sort of alternative proteins if they were on the back of a label by clean label enthusiasts. So you see things like alternate almond proteins tend to score very high, things that are natural source, things that are recognizable. You get a drop in the second group for things that are less familiar or that have certain perceptions of being a certain degree of processing, by using the words like concentrate or isolate in the naming convention. And you see like isolated soy protein down in the red is distinctly even worse than the word when you use isolate at the end of the word, like soy protein isolate versus isolated soy protein. You see a difference in the name. So these are things that, and then at the very lowest end, things such as protein from insects, which people select as the lowest score because that's something that they view as they're not going to want. So given that, if you were to look in Impossible Burger and Beyond Burger, you see that Impossible Burger lists on their ingredient statement textured protein, wheat protein, potato protein, and soy protein isolate, and Beyond Burger lists pea protein isolate. So in looking at these, what you see is Impossible Burger is basically in the yellow zone, as well as Beyond Meat Burger. So if I were to advise or to improve the clean label score, if you can move up to pea protein versus pea protein isolate, you get a significant increase in acceptability of that, and so on and so forth. So really interesting. The pea protein is more acceptable than soy protein. Isolate tends to be especially when it's a lead word, suggests additional processing, so it's less natural. Less familiar proteins tend to be scored lower, and so on and so forth. So that's what we've learned so far over the last couple of years through our clean label, the data that we've been collecting on an ongoing basis for various different foods and products. So that all said, what I want to do next is change presenter here. We're going to send this on over, and we're going to let Julie talk about alternative proteins. So Julie, take it away. Julie?
You got me, Dave?
Yes.
All right.
Go ahead.
I've got it. So we're going to look at the alternative protein study that we've recently conducted.
Julie, you're on display settings, not you need to move your.
Okay, let's do this.
You
Always
need to
something, isn't it?
change your display settings.
Yep. Let's
Swap
just do
view.
that.
There you go.
Okay. All right. So, sorry about that. We recently conducted an alternate protein study, and we did this in 2019 in April. And I am not advancing. Sorry, guys. Okay. We did that with 202 clean label enthusiasts and 207 members of the general public that were not concerned with clean labels. We'll call them CLE for the clean label enthusiast and non-CLE for the non-clean label enthusiast. All right, so we asked both groups if alternative proteins were the future of protein. We asked clean label enthusiasts were more confident than non-clean label enthusiasts, compared for a difference of 41% for CLE and 28% for non-CLE. They had comments such as, absolutely the future. Animals are too costly to raise and maintain in a humane way. Or yes, because they're healthier and safer to consume and also helps to reduce harming the environment. Non-clean label enthusiasts, on the other hand, said, I think people will always eat meat proteins. I don't think alternative proteins will replace meat. And nope, alternative proteins do not taste as good as meat. So we wanted to take a look at what CLE and non-CLE were currently consuming in the areas of proteins, which included traditional animal proteins as well as common and lesser known alternative proteins. Animal proteins and more common alternative proteins were consumed much more frequently than lesser known alternative proteins. We can see that beef and pork are consumed less frequently by CLE than non-CLE. This could be an indicator that beef and pork are on the decline. One note, even though it does not have a high protein content, we included jackfruit in our list of alternative proteins because its texture closely mimics that of meat. and as a result, it is commonly used as a protein substitute. We then looked at which alternative proteins were being used as replacements of traditional meat products. Again, CLE scored higher or the same for replacing meat with an alternative protein. Nuts, peas, and beans outscored lesser-known proteins, but on the whole, we can see that interest in non-animal proteins as a replacement is high for both CLE and non-CLE. We wanted to see who was even aware of these alternative proteins. We asked this question of awareness. CLE were more aware than non-CLE of all proteins mentioned. However, awareness was relatively low in general for many proteins such as mycoprotein or algae spirulina. When discussing alternative proteins, were respondents willing to try them? For most common proteins, CLE were more willing than non-CLE, but there were two exceptions: lab-grown meat and insect protein. CLE are lead consumers, so this could indicate that these two protein types could struggle with acceptance in the future. The data from the implicit test that Dave outlined earlier is compiled into an implicit score, which is shown on this graph. Animal proteins scored high, as well as nuts, fish, and beans. Less familiar alternative proteins had lower scores for both CLE and non-CLE, which may be due to a lack of familiarity. However, CLE tended to outscore non-CLE with these products, showing that they may begin to gain acceptance. Earlier, I mentioned that CLE were consuming less beef and pork than non-CLE. And here we see that given those that they also give those two proteins lower implicit scores. Again, this could be an indicator that beef and pork will be on the decline in the future. So to dig a little deeper, we probed as to why our respondents would accept or reject a protein. Taste was the determining factor for both groups. CLE were much more likely to accept a protein for health benefits over non-CLE, and those considered natural also had higher acceptance. It's interesting to note the small percentage of CLE and non-CLE that accepted a protein because it was good for the environment, an indicator that taste and health are more top of mind than the environmental impact of proteins. Breaking these protein groups down into small subcategories of meat, fish, fruits and vegetables, processed non-animal, and novel alternatives, and then looking at the perceptions of different reasons for acceptance, good for the environment and good for my health, sources of vitamins and minerals, taste good, affordable, and convenient, we can see that users who have tried the proteins in each category, the largest differences between CLE and non-CLE are found in novel alternatives. This data indicates that even though it may be challenging to initially get CLE to accept some products, such as insect protein, once they accept a protein, CLE becomes strong believers in the benefits of it. Digging deeper into the implicit test results, we wanted to see if there was a relationship between the implicit score of the protein and the willingness to try. We found a direct relationship, and the higher the implicit score, the higher percentage either having tried in the past or being willing to try it. This shows that implicit testing truly does measure actual behavior. So where are the pitfalls for alternative proteins? As mentioned earlier, taste, health benefits, and naturalness are key considerations for acceptance. Sources such as insect protein or lab-grown meat did not grow with this criteria in mind. For insect protein, 51% said it was of CLE who rejected it said it was disgusting. For lab-grown meat of CLE who rejected it, 48% said it was unnatural. Looking at tofu of the CLE who rejected it, 50% said it tastes bad, and 29% of those said it was disgusting. It's interesting to note that tofu is a relatively familiar alternative protein. Obviously, it's not delivering. But what about opportunities? Looking at some lesser-known proteins such as jackfruit and seitan, reasons for rejecting the protein were simply unfamiliarity. This could be an opportunity to define the ingredient in the mind of the consumer. So, since taste was a huge concern that rose to the surface of this research, we asked respondents how they would like the alternative protein to taste. Better than meat, just as good as meat, or not quite as good as meat products if they were considering purchasing the protein. Most said better or just as good as meat products, which again confirms that taste is a driver in the acceptance of alternative proteins. Respondents wanted the alternative proteins to taste as much like meat to a greater extent than to taste very different from meat. Looking at how much people are willing to pay for alternative proteins, CLE were more willing to pay more for the same than non-CLE, and non-CLE tended to want to pay less. Again, this supports the notion that CLE are on the forefront of the alternative protein movement. So what did we learn with this research? We learned that CLE versus non-CLE are more likely to believe that alternative proteins are the future of proteins. Awareness of new alternative proteins was generally higher in the CLE compared to non-CLE. Nuts, beans, and peas had very high implicit scores overall. Regardless of clean label concerns, consumers are not willing to pay more for alternative proteins, and familiarity was a stumbling block for acceptance of alternative proteins. Now I'm going to send this back to Dave. All right, Dave, do you have it back?
Okay. Yes. All right. So just a reminder, if any of you have any questions before we move forward here, please start thinking about those. You can enter them now, and we'll go into as I go into some wrap-ups here. So we titled this about cultivating trust. And we found that, and as we, in our last webinar last month, we were talking about sweeteners and carbohydrates a lot, but a lot of it is, we also showed a lot of research that we've done on trust and how trust is really important in the minds of consumers to drive various different purchase behaviors. So thinking about trust, what we're finding is that alternative proteins are an ideal way to address consumer concerns as a way to cultivate trust for your brands and trust for the different products that you provide. And so the research we showed here is that health concerns are really the primary motives today that are underlying this demand for alternative proteins. We also found that this demand is going to continue to grow in motivating food choice into the future by looking at the differences between clean label enthusiasts and regular primary shoppers in the US. We're also finding that the greatest opportunity for alternative and plant-based proteins versus meat alternatives is in the replacement of pork and beef-based foods. Now, that said, consumers are not willing to trade away taste and are not willing to pay more for these alternative sources. Consumers are looking at an alternative that products taste as good and in many cases the same as beef-based or pork-based foods or other meat-based foods. So this is really, so to cultivate trust, it is we need to really address these consumer concerns, listen to consumers, and provide them some products that really address these concerns. In addition, if you're going to further cultivate trust, is you need to understand how to select the best alternative proteins for the consumer targets that you're designing for. And in particular, your protein ingredient labeling is essential. As we're seeing from clean label enthusiasts, these individuals that read the back labels, these individuals that we've built this community for, they are very sensitive to proteins as named on these ingredient labels that signal natural. They are also very sensitive to minimally processed. So avoid words such as isolate, concentrate, or texturize. and so on and so forth as much as you can within the regulations that you have and the alternatives, and select alternatives that have high awareness and that are indicative of sources of alternative proteins that are culturally acceptable. And right now and into the future, it doesn't look like there's going to be any acceptance for insect-based proteins or proteins that are non-natural, grown in the lab, or whatever you want to say. So for these reasons, this is a rapidly moving, fast-changing area right now. So stay abreast of your future trends for how motives are going to change, as we found that alternative proteins associated with good for as good as or better for the environment is something that is not in the mindset today of consumers, but could certainly change in the future. So with all that said, I think we're ready for some questions. I know that there's a few here, and so there's a whole bunch. So I'm going to go through these. So interesting results for meat substitutes. Do you have any data for alternative protein beverages? For example, soy milk, almond milk, etc. So the answer is, at this stage in our database, we do have a considerable amount of information about alternative proteins and we're finding some very interesting things in these. So of course, these beverages is not just the proteins, but it's other sort of ingredients that are important in it. But it's from a protein perspective, we are finding that there's very little information in a lot of these. The soy type of protein sources are predominant right now and very accepting for many of these products. So, anyways, if you want to, whoever this individual is, if you want to contact us directly, I can provide you a wealth of other information about beverages. Okay, please elaborate on the drivers of purchase, health versus environment. Okay, so I can address that, or you can address that. Why don't you go with that, Julie?
So that was questions that we asked to the people that responded of, were these things important to you when looking at alternative proteins? We didn't specifically ask what was driving that, just what's important to you when purchasing this particular protein. And as we noticed, that taste and health and naturalness were more drivers than environmental concerns. So we didn't specifically ask why those questions, but that's what popped from that.
Yeah, just kind of showing this slide again. It shows that amongst people that had tried various different proteins, these were some of their attitudes and beliefs, and for various different products. So I think this is you see that environmental concerns, good for the environment, is more predominant amongst clean label enthusiasts. Like half of them listed that as a reason, but a greater percentage listed for novel alternatives, that is, good for my health. And so good for the environment amongst fruits and vegetables, nuts, peas, beans, jackfruit, things like that. Again, about half of clean label enthusiasts, just under half of non-clean label enthusiasts, these other primary shoppers in the marketplace, listed good for the environment, but it is secondary to good for my health and taste good and so on, and affordability, as well as convenience.
Yeah. Okay. I'll read the next one, Dave. Did you learn anything
Sure.
about duckweed as an alternative protein in terms of awareness and trust? and I can answer that for you. We did not look at duckweed specifically. As you can tell from the questions that we're getting and the wealth of information that we gathered, that we could have gone many directions with this alternative protein study, and we just focused on those areas that you saw in the presentation.
Yeah, so duckweed, I mean, I'm going to go to this slide here. You see that duckweed was something that got a very low score with regard to in general. And now we have, I don't know, but we have this broken out in terms of the different applications where those scores came from. But it's basically duckweed protein is not something that is very familiar. So consumers in general are very leery of it as an alternative source. You want to read the next one, Julie?
Yep, sorry,
Okay.
gotta love that mute button. Are CLE and non-CLE results also reflecting dietary preferences such as vegan, etc., in study design and results? That is a great question because we did ask um, both of those groups who was a vegan or vegetarian, and they very much followed along the lines of what we know of the general population, which I believe is 3 to 5%, and it did not have bearing on the way that they responded. So that we took it into consideration, thinking we were going to find something, but it really wasn't a point of differentiation.
Right. I'm going to add to that is clean label enthusiasts are no more vegan than non-clean label enthusiasts. Clean label enthusiasts um, are tend to be, it's a behavioral segment that cuts across a lot of different buying and eating behaviors, a lot of different dietary. So a lot of clean label enthusiasts are looking at a more general sort of lifestyle that may not necessarily include vegan or other vegetarian sort of approaches to their diets.
Okay, then there was a question. Thanks. Could you show the slide for overall as well? And I'm thinking that's the slide, Dave, that you just showed
Right,
with all the, yeah. So I think we've got that
right.
one
The
covered.
details, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
and then
So
there's another question. Remind us of the definition of CLE details. And
yeah, so
go
yeah,
ahead.
so a clean label enthusiast. I'll go back to. I'll pull up that slide I gave, which because I think it's an important question. Let me find it here. So clean label enthusiasts are forward-thinking consumers. That is, they are indicators of I think what will become the mainstream more and more in the future because they're a growing segment. They read and so they're a behavioral segment because we know these individuals have a greater tendency to read the ingredient labels on the backside of products, and they have very specific attitudes and beliefs about things that are about additives, things that are artificial, things that are non-natural sources and it cuts across not just proteins but all sorts of ingredients. So and they definitely will. They have different buying behaviors. They tend to shop at more stores than non-clean label enthusiasts. They tend to focus on different types of brands and so on and so forth. So anyway, so we have a wealth of information. If you want to know more about clean label enthusiasts, we would just welcome to talk to you more about it and address your questions specifically because it's, I think, an important group to look at, and that's why we have this community. So if you are interested in this community, you want to get access to it, let us know. We've got, again, wealth of information. We provide monthly in-depth reports on various different topics, such as this, that you would get prior to our webinars. We also, it's a lens into the future, it's access and you get access to reports and new insights and so on. And we are seeking partners. We're seeking people that would like to be a part of this because we believe it's something that the industry can use. It's a shared database that everybody who has access to it, we will extend the database specifically for every subscriber in which way they want to. So it's constantly building for no additional cost. It's just built into, and then it's just something that you can have actually access to these people for fairly low cost to talk to and to whether it's quantitative or qualitative type of research. So, again, it's an exciting topic. Thank you for everyone who attended today, and we would like to next month. We're going to be. This is on the June the 13th. We're going to be talking about consumer perceptions about packaging and packaging alternatives. Very exciting topic, and it has a lot of really cool insights that can be valuable for those that are working in packaged goods. Okay, so anything you want to add, Julie, before we sign off?
No, I just hope everyone can join next month about packaging as alternative proteins have been very interesting. We've seen a lot of companies getting rid of straws, getting rid of making things are recyclable, biodegradable, and I'm really excited to delve into that research and show it to you guys next month. So
Yep,
thanks,
and
everyone.
these sessions are recorded so that you will have, if you wish, or somebody else that you know of would be interested in this, you can send them a link so that they can register. Once you register, you have access to these past webinars, and not only this one, but a whole host of the other webinars we've been doing monthly for the last 2 years. All right. So everyone, have a great day. Thank you for attending again, and for this next episode of Webinars Now. And until next month, take care.